Well, folks, I told you that today we were going to have some people who I've admired, who I bump into occasionally at shows and in travel. Uh, the folks from HOWL for Wildlife, Mike Costello, Charles Whitwam. Sure appreciate you guys taking time to be here today. There seems to be no shortage of things you guys could be doing other than talking to me.
This is a lot of what we do, and this is a lot of how we're effective is getting the message out. So this is perfect.
Well, there,
Thank you.
there's yeah, there's a lot in our audience who has heard of. They call it, you guys are Howl for Wildlife, I think is your formal name, but a lot of people
Yeah,
just say Howl.
yeah,
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
and anyone who's wondering, it's howl.org is where the best place is to find you guys. But you guys, I don't. Maybe it's good that we do a little bit of backstory when you started, how you got into it. But you guys have emerged as one of the thinkers and one of the platforms that really get hunters organized on a lot of issues that are super important to us. I always say, if you're gonna spend your time online complaining on Facebook, would you go and sign up at howl.org and do what they tell you to do? They make it really easy to do something other than complain on Facebook.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say it that way because I might piss them off. But
there's a
anyhow,
lot of complaining on Facebook that could be redirected. If that energy could be distilled out and just focused,
oh
just 10% of it could be focused on the actual issues
yeah.
and the
Yeah.
channels that can be used for those issues, we would just be ahead of everything.
Oh, we'd run the table. But
Yes.
anyhow, I'm gonna let you guys tell the story of how does something like Howl for Wildlife become an organization? There had to been some moment where one of you guys were talking or thinking and said, "Yeah, I think the time has come."
Mm.
Certainly. So in 2019, my first entrance, the first time I'd been involved in any type of, I guess what I would say advocacy, I took it personally. It was in California, and there was a wild pig bill in California, and there was some good things in it, but also some bad stuff in it. And I worked with like West Coast Archery Shop, J.R. Young from BHA, and Andy Mokel, the flip flop guy, and a few other people to get the message out on this bill that we didn't like. And it was how do we kill this bill? How do we reach the legislators? How do we reach the decision makers? And that was sort of my first step into it. And we were successful in killing that bill. And we were all like, yay, this is great. And then in 2021, at the very beginning, there was a Senate bill in California that was Humane Society sponsored. They found a senator, and it was to frankly just end bear hunting in California. Um, at that moment, when I first heard about it, I called up John Stallone, who is the vice president of HOWL now, and I said, "Hey, we got this big thing going on, and I need all the people that they need to know about this."
Yeah.
And we didn't have this wasn't a howl yet, but we were like, what do we do? Let's start a change.org petition. And we got that out to everybody, and it became a nationwide issue. Everybody was concerned about this bill in California. And in 5 days, the amount of calls and walk-ins to the senator's office and emails, of course, to the extent that change.org works, he was flooded. It was a San Francisco senator, and flooded with emails, and that bill was pulled, I believe, within 5 days.
Wow.
And everybody was really, really concerned about that. And I remember J.R. Young called me. I didn't know about it. I didn't know it was pulled. He called me. He goes, "That bill just got killed. Like, this was awesome." So, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, this soon?" Because yeah, it was pulled. So at that point, um, I wanted to capture what had happened. I
Yeah.
wanted to capture all the people that joined in and got really focused on this issue and kind of the unification process that happened. So I basically said that to John. I said, I want to capture this. I want to start something that where we can actually really effectively reach legislators or whoever the decision makers are. At this point, I was kind of educated on how the typical action centers work. What I mean is, when an organization says, sign our action page and you'll reach this legislator and all that. I was educated on how that worked, but I knew there was better ways to do it. And that was really I think the motivations to start HOWL was take what exists and do it better. And we started with the Action Center, and that I don't know how technically you want to get, but that's where HOWL really I think stands aside from everybody else because we took the time to frankly modernize it,
Yeah.
right? So it's a really effective way digitally, online or whatever through emails or calls, to not only reach your legislator but to get feedback from them because we personalize the whole process,
Yeah.
right? So that's where it started. The name Howl was, I was looking for acronyms and I was like, yeah, hunters and outdoorsmen for wildlife. And I was like, that's Howl, but wildlife isn't really two words. And I was like, well, Howl for wildlife seems not like an aggressive pro hunting thing. And in fact, I think it might work with the general public because the general public is where our impact really is, right? If
Yeah.
if we can change the narrative there, we change the whole game. So
Right.
the name was intentional to kind of throw people off, and it did.
It
It
did.
threw,
Still does. Still
yeah,
does.
it threw a lot of hunters off, but that was kind
Uh,
of a part of the game. Like I think we need different messaging. I think we
Right.
need
mhm.
a different vehicle to really carry our message to the non-hunting public because at the end of the day, sure, we can have all the hunters in the world activated and talking about it in our echo chambers, but if we aren't effectively reaching the non-hunting public, um, the general voter out there, then we're not really going to have any impact at all. So
Yeah.
the name kind of just came from that idea,
Hmm.
and we went with it, and here we are. And I know a lot more people certainly are pleased with Howl for Wildlife, and they're not questioning who we are so much anymore, especially because we get involved in some pretty serious issues, like we'll champion, trapping issues often, or, Prop 127 in Colorado, which was mountain lion hunting, or issues surrounding wolves. So yeah, I mean that's kind of how it started with, I think, a different approach to this whole game and the space that we operate in.
Well, I figured it was something like that where some person who's highly motivated and joins forces with some other people, and all of a sudden it turns into something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I try to convince people, and hopefully they believe me when I say this, that nothing scares an elected official more than a small handful of highly informed, motivated people.
Yep.
And by handful, it might only be five. It doesn't even need to be 10.
Yeah.
And so, Mike, how did you get drawn into this then?
So in parallel to the that Charles's story, the next year after the senator from San Francisco pulled that legislation out. Of course, I was on the change.org thing. I was a spectator to that. I was also in the Facebook forums for those 5 to 10 days saying we need to all step up. Like the deer hunting forums, like we need to step up. We can beat this. 90% of the people had the attitude of, oh, we're going to lose. Woe is me. It's going away. I talked to a warden 10 years ago. He said it would go away. Everybody's got their favorite warden that they report on that says hunting's going away 5 years from now. Like, okay. But then a year later, it came back in the form of a petition to our commission.
Hmm.
And again, a lot of people, oh, we're never gonna win, we're never gonna win. And I had the attitude, and I still do about all of these things. There's no predestined outcome. Like we can win this. We need to show up. Like we have to at least fight it.
Yeah.
And so I started running, like putting together Zoom calls community forums to say, hey, how do we show up in the commission? Here's how we do this. Here's how we go in. Here's how we talk. Here's our opportunity. And I was getting 60, 90, 100 people on these calls. Somebody said, you need to talk to this guy, Charles. He's building a program for advocacy. And they're like, one of our first conversations, I said, oh, we just need to get some incentive. Like if we could just give everybody like a Cabela's gift card for making a statement or gamify it or something like that. And Charles was like, well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do is make it so you can get points, like you can gamify the activity of showing up. And that's kind of been eclipsed by other things. But at that point, I transitioned my calendaring for these community calls onto the HOWL platform. And the thing that really, like at that point, we're in COVID. So everybody's home, everybody's in Zoom now. People are figuring out that Zoom works. Um, the thing that really changed was instead of showing up with the commission, with pitchforks and fire and angry that you're taking something away from us potentially, we changed the dialogue into the value statements of why people hunt bear, what
Yeah.
they do with the meat, what that means to their family, what it means to their values of conservation, because they, for them, there's a purpose to it. And so we really had a commission that had never heard hunters speaking from the heart about why that activity is important to them. And so over about a 9-month period, we had literally hundreds of hunters showing up in public forums speaking their value statement uniquely, whereas the HSUS and their spawn of 20 or 30 organizations that show up, they all read the same script. And it became apparent to the commission that one is an agendized group and one is a group of people with values that are unique and personal, and they're not just interested in slaughtering bears. And that changed the entire outcome. And so I still believe that we can show up, and we need to show up with our values and express in mass and at scale what it is that we're doing and why it's important to us, but also why it's important to wildlife. And when we do that, we can turn a lot of people around.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that I in the notes that I sent you guys is I want to focus on some of these things, and you guys just brought up a couple of them in
Hmm.
California, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of people are going to think, how could hunters prevail with anything in California?
Hmm.
And through organization, through messaging, through showing up, you guys did it. And I worry that too often, and we're a cross section of society, so this is a societal observation, not just in the hunting community, that we just feel like, well, why bother? We're going to get wiped out. Well,
Hmm. Hmm.
if that's how, if you don't show up and say we're here to win the game, you're probably not going to win the game. Like there was a Super Bowl last night.
Yeah.
Hmm.
One team showed up and said, we
Mm.
are here to win the game.
Yeah. You know
Oh
who
well.
didn't win? You know who didn't win was the people that were outside complaining about the refs outside the arena. They never win. And if all you do is sit outside and complain about the refs and never actually show up, even step on the field, you'll never win. And that's the problem is we're too busy drinking cheap beer outside complaining about the rules. Like
Yeah.
the rules are the rules. We don't have to like them, but we got to play.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so that's my hope in our platforms. And one of my desires of having you guys here is you guys have this view and this idea of how hunting has a powerful story, how if it's articulated and articulated from our own perspectives,
Hmm.
it's effective.
Hmm.
I've seen it. You guys have seen it. And when we see states that are really getting pummeled, like Washington, Colorado, even you in California, maybe some starts of it in Arizona, and some of the East Coast states have been dealing with this for a long time. Uh, Hunters need to start realizing that this is not a forgotten cause. This hope is not forlorn at this point. Only if we let it become that
Hmm.
is it truly a lost cause. And so uh, you guys just instantly give two really good examples of that. And so you decide to start this group, and here we are, almost 4 years later. It's morphed and evolved and become a big player on the landscape. Did you guys think it was gonna get to this point?
Big player. There's three
We
three and a
hoped it
half,
would.
two
we
two and a half full-time equivalents,
yeah. We
if
we
that.
certainly hoped it would. We wanted our influence and what we were going for to be realized as something different. And see, my point of view when I look at how battles had been fought in the past, um, there wasn't a whole but it's almost like hunters or maybe even the hunting organizations were kind of shy. They were shying away from getting their message out to the general public. They wanted a bunch of hunters to show up, sure, but there was
Hmm.
kind of afraid of the messaging to get it out to the public because the public's never gonna, they don't believe this. There's too many liberals. There's all this stuff,
Yeah.
and I think we have the most reasonable argument. So if we were all in a room and we had 100 people in a room, and five of them are anti-hunters and five of them are hunters, and both sides can articulate their argument well enough, I'll bet every single day that our side wins. Because
Yeah.
when we really dig into it, when we really debate, we have the reasonable argument. And I can kind of simplify it. I mean, I think the reasonable argument is science-based wildlife management versus preservation.
Yep.
And what's going to work better? I mean, it's oversimplifying it, and it's not always science, and commissions aren't always perfect, and departments aren't always perfect, but there is a process and there is a framework, and I think we can use that to change the narrative. And I think now I know other organizations are kind of catching on to that and stepping in a little more into that space. And whether it's HOWL or not, if they do that, our entire message as hunters, as outdoorsmen, as sportsmen, whatever you want to call them, will only grow and get better and become more attractive. There's a long ways to go there,
Yeah.
but in a sense, we're taking some plays from the playbook of the anti-hunters. They've been at this for decades,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I don't think we have. I don't think we have at all. I don't see it. So, we're forced to look at what can we do in 5 years, what can we do in 10 years, but what do we need to do starting right now
Hmm.
to get to that point? And
Yeah.
it's really at the end of the day, I don't think it's more hunters. I think it's more people understanding what hunting really is.
Yeah.
And let's see those big changes because there's a pendulum swift or shift happening right now.
Yeah.
We'll see it, and we are seeing it in California with decades and decades and decades, 30, 40 years, whatever it is, of zero, really zero mountain lion management at all.
Hmm.
And bear management being for the most part stripped away. You can boot hunt bears. And then now wolves coming in, and everyone's up in arms and trying to figure out, well, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? The black-tailed deer population is in big time demise, and the public. The great part about this is the public is starting to speak about it. Why am I
Hmm.
seeing mountain lions in the daytime?
Yeah.
I'm taking
In my
all of the
backyard.
precautions, taking all the precautions that we've been given from to protect our livestock or protect sheep or whatever it is, and it's not working anymore. Like the
Hmm.
lions are just they're in our front yard and they're staring at us like, hey, we're not afraid of you anymore.
Yeah.
So to see the public, not hunters, to see the public bring this up, that forces change, and those
Yeah.
conversations are happening. So if we can recognize that, I think the opportunity we have to really insert ourselves into that conversation, then we can help drive where that conversation goes, and offer some sensible management solutions when it's necessary. And I think the public, I mean, shoot, as we just saw in Colorado,
Yeah.
it wasn't because we suddenly found 7 million hunters out of nowhere that had never voted before. It's because the general public went, science-based wildlife management, that makes sense to us. We'd
Right.
never heard that before. And when we weren't out there talking about we hate lions, we weren't making lions in that case, the bad guy, right?
Right.
And I think in the hunting space that happens a lot, where it's them versus us, and
Mhm.
we're reactionary, and you got the quote unquote pro wolf people or pro lion people against the hunters, and the hunters come out as almost like they're against lions or they're against predators, and some do say that, and
Right.
that's I don't really know if they really believe that. I don't know. Maybe some do, maybe some don't. I just think the messaging is wrong. But that's exactly what we didn't do in Colorado, and um, it was a big shift from the vote that took place in 2020 with wolves, and I think it was because it was focused on science-based wildlife management and not eradication of lions. It was
Yeah.
about a healthy population of lions that benefits everybody, benefits the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it was that. I think it was also that finally some groups that you guys were a part of had Dan Gates on, had
Certainly.
Gaspar on.
Yeah.
Uh, we became more strategic and we developed tactics to implement that strategy.
Yeah.
And by and large, hunters have never been good at that. As you referenced, the other sides who have
Hmm.
always tried to push hunting off the field, out the bleachers and out into the parking lot, they have been very good at that.
Hmm.
And I think it proved that i- if we have strategy and we use tactics and we use messaging and communication that we know works, the general public has a different idea or comes away with a different perception of what the debate and the discussion is about.
Hmm.
And they're the they're not if you read about the psychology of folks who feel under attack or feel that you're in the minority and there's threats against you, you have a tendency to think everybody out there is your enemy
Right.
or a
Yeah.
potential
Yeah.
enemy. And in the process of doing that, you're probably looking at the other 90%, of which well over half of them, probably two-thirds of them, are a potential ally
That's
rather than your enemy.
yeah, you hit
Usually
the
they don't
nail on the
care.
head right there.
Actually,
Yeah,
usually a lot of times they just simply don't care, and they're making an assessment on a picture and a slogan, and they're really busy. And if it's our picture and our slogan, if it's our story, they're going to be influenced by that. If it's the other sides, and if people think that we're always up against anti-hunters, or if the tide is always going against us, that didn't happen accidentally. Like, that didn't just happen because the wind shifted. Like, that was an intentional push of strategy and tactics by organizations that do want to take this away.
Hmm.
yeah,
And they made it look like the population feels the same way when
yeah.
maybe the population doesn't. So we've got to adopt the same strategic vision. I mean, Charles and I, a year or so ago, talking about Washington State, you know, we realize that what needs to happen in Washington State is that the typical elected leader needs to know that the political winds are shifting in favor of science-based management.
Mhm.
And if the typical political leader gets that sense that the winds are shifting because the general population has heard more stories about what hunting really is, then that commission will change eventually.
Yeah,
And so we've got to talk to, yeah, I used to work for Amazon. I used to joke to think about, like, I need to make sure that there's 5 people on the floor that I work on that know I hunt.
yeah,
Like, if the person in the elevator doesn't know you hunt, they will be more likely to vote against you, because they've got this caricature in their head about what a hunter is. But if they know it's me and I actually deliver good work, and we go out and have a beer after work and we hang out, then they're less likely to vote against my interests.
yeah.
So we have to let people know who we are, what we do. And that comes through our storytelling. It comes through showing up in the commissions, talking to our electeds.
Well, as someone who's been blessed to have storytelling platforms, uh, I take that part really seriously.
Hmm.
It's part of why I left TV in 1990. When was that? 19 or 19? Tell how old I am. In 2017.
I was gonna
Uh,
say, hold on a second.
17.
I know.
Yeah,
Sorry, guys.
I saw you on TV not too long ago. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
but
1990.
yeah, I would deliver things to the network that had heavy food aspects in it.
Mm.
The processing, converting this dead animal to food. I mean, it's okay to tell a story about the hunt and the adventure and the landscape and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But if we wonder why society in general questions our commitment to food and to some of the things that we say are the compelling parts of our story, well, our storytelling and our messaging around that sucks.
Hmm.
Because if you ever watch, let's use a mountain lion hunt. Have you ever seen a mountain lion hunt that ends with anything other than the guy or gal who shot it giving it the
Yeah.
bear hug and
Right.
holding it and a picture of the hounds next to it,
Right.
which is all fine and great for sharing with your buddies, but that short stops of how the hide's utilized, how the skull is utilized, and the meat,
Yes.
most
Mm-hmm.
importantly. And so people are like, how does no one know that we eat mountain lions? I'm like, have you ever seen it?
Nobody shows it. Yeah.
And so I started doing a lot of that, and I got a lot of resistance. I'm like, you know what?
Hmm.
If one of our largest storytelling platforms is afraid to have the discussion around food and some of these other things, I don't want to be on those platforms. So
Yeah.
I
Interesting.
took the deep jump into the current and said, well, I'm either going to swim or I'm going to sink.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that messaging has been, I think a lot of it has been laziness. I think a lot of it is we don't want to make ourselves vulnerable. Some of these stories are a little harder to articulate, right? Anyone who takes basic communication, you learn that the easiest story to tell is man versus nature. The second easiest after that is man versus man. And the hardest story to tell is man versus himself.
Hmm.
Well, when you take the life of another living being, sentient being out there, elk or deer or whatever, a lion, that creates an inner conflict. That gets to the core of man versus himself. And those are harder stories to tell. And
Mm-hmm.
we've just said, no, let's not tell those difficult stories. Let's just, shoot them up, bang, bang. Uh, and that's not just in video. You read quite a bit of that in modern day print. You never hear the old Jack O'Connor kind of story of
Mm.
going to a landscape and trying to understand the indigenous people. We've lost a lot of
Mm-hmm.
our storytelling, even though we've been storytellers for since time began. Uh, I think the way we've let media be lazy about telling our story has got us to you were remarking about how it just didn't happen overnight and how change doesn't happen overnight. I think a lot of the way that our story has been told didn't happen overnight, but it happened because of what we did or what we didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it in our content, right? If I put a thumbnail and a title on a YouTube video that says Randy shoots his biggest bull elk ever, it's going to have 100,000 views that night.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But if I said Randy explains the history of how this piece of land became public land or how this conservation movement started, I'll be lucky if I have 1,000 views that night.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that my storytelling? Well, I'm probably not the best storyteller, but do we have audiences that are trained to just look for the shoot 'em up, bang bang kind of easier story that we've
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
we've kind of raised them on?
Mm-hmm.
And so, in this whole idea of communicating our story to a larger society, uh, it is a challenge, and we got to get better at it. I know that every day. That's what we work on trying to do is to try be better at that. It's
Mm-hmm.
It it
about
it, it is hard. It makes me think of not every hunter is going to be a great conservationist. Not
right.
every hunter is going to understand the conservation model. And I think we have to be okay with that. Um, and when I'm going to bridge this to the non-hunter, we need not most non-hunters aren't going to understand how hunting really works. The most important thing that we can do with the non-hunting space is that they trust that there's mechanisms in place that yield good outcomes for wildlife, and that those mechanisms, that a mechanized regulated hunting program has good outcomes for wildlife. And if they know that, if they trust that part of it, they don't need to know how to get a bighorn sheep tag in Colorado. Like, they don't need to know that, and they don't need to become a hunter either. And so I think there are, and so this is where not every hunter is going to be a good storyteller. Not every hunter is going to be a good conservationist. We have to choose as the individuals that care and organizations that are intent on doing this. We have to choose to start pushing, creating the stories and getting them in front of an audience that won't pay for the product. The
Yeah.
constituents that we need to watch this aren't going to buy the ticket to the movie. So we have to find ways to create the 30-second reel, the landing page, and then the 30-minute, podcast or video, the longer form. We have to find a way to create those stories that takes that non-hunter down a path of at least understanding and trusting that regulated hunting works. And then when they get the attack from the anti-hunting industry, they'll look at that and they'll say, I think you're lying to me.
Yeah.
Those headlines that cats aren't trophies used in Colorado, the 3 top headlines that they start with were all lies.
Mm.
Complete misrepresentations of what hunting is, who hunters are, what we do with the meat, all those things. And we needed Colorado citizens and voters to look at those headlines and not trust them because it was BS. And so I think we have to figure out who are the organizations going to be that can create stories intended to be consumed by people that are not us to
Yeah.
strategically steer their perspective and their sentiment towards hunting.
Yeah, that worked in Colorado. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
when we all bumped into each other at SHOT Show.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they were going over, they invited a bunch of us there about what the plan was.
Mm-hmm.
And I left that meeting quite impressed because it was the first real strategic planning meeting I'd ever been to where a bunch of groups and communicators in the hunting space got together
Mm-hmm.
and said, all right, this is how successful communication happens.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about what the message needs to be, but who the messengers need to be. And we aren't trying to sway the West Slope person who is growing up on a ranch. We're trying to sway the Front Range person who has never left the confines of suburban Denver.
Right.
And using those strategies and those tactics were successful.
Mm-hmm.
But I am, me, the old gray haired white guy, I'm not the guy who should be the messenger when we're trying to talk to somebody who maybe is a front ranger who's would look at just instantly say that guy from Montana, man, he's lost it. No
Mm-hmm.
matter what message I had. So there's it's not just message, it's the messengers,
Mm-hmm.
it's tactics used to deliver. Uh, and I think one thing that was also successful in Colorado was it was authentic. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't manufactured. It was fully supported by everything that anyone who might question or ask, there was support for what was stated on the side of that we would call ourselves with. And so I think if we are authentic and truthful, back to your point, Charles, if you put that 100 people in the room with 5 on each side, if we tell our story well, we're going to sway the majority of those people of that other 90 in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the I know that's a
It's
bit of a
it.
tangent in a
Yeah.
dive into the communication world, but I live it and breathe it every day. Uh, and we just struggle with how do we get our audiences to understand or to watch or to listen to what we think are really important conservation messages.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of noise out there, if you want to call it that. There's a lot of options for people to watch or listen. How do we make ours compelling enough that the right people, and we don't need to be the largest platform, we just need to be the best platform. How do we get the right people to listen and absorb that, feel that it's I don't know if inspiring is the right word, motivating maybe is the other word, uh, to get them to take action about
Mm.
something that is dear to them and important. And that's a daily challenge. It's fun to show up every day, and that's what I get to do. But there are days where I leave here saying, I don't know soup from poop about how to do this.
Hmm.
'Cause sometimes we come up with what we think are the best plans and they just fall on their face. And then sometimes out of the blue, something successful happens. But
I
so,
think you're talking about strategy, and you're exactly right. And it is building the right team. And what you saw at Shot Show, that was the press release, and yeah, that was kind of the first kind of public facing strategy meeting, about what was going to happen, and it really, that really turned out great. And I think that, kind of back to Mike's point, frankly, we have to pay to put the right messaging um, into the public space.
yeah.
What we're going to get back is not going to be monetary. And I think that's where a lot of the hunting industry struggles. Kind of
Hmm.
like what you were saying on the TV show. If I'm talking to you, Randy, if you and I are hanging out and you're telling me about your latest buck hunt or something, right? You're
Yep.
going to tell me about the buck hunt because you and I have an understanding. I know that you went home and ate it. I know that
Right.
you did all that, but I want to hear about your adventure on that buck hunt. You know what I mean? And I'm going to get it. I'm totally going to get it. I don't need to hear
Yep.
about the food, right?
Hmm.
But on mountain lions specifically, most hunters, from the conversations I've had, because most hunters don't hunt mountain lions.
Right.
Most hunters didn't know you could eat mountain lions. The
No,
amount of
that's
people that have said, "What do you mean you can eat mountain lions?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's really good," and didn't know that at all. Like, that's usually the reply back I get. I didn't know that whatsoever. How's it taste? And kind of sweet pork, whatever. And so, to start with, there's a lot of education that needs to be done in the hunting space, so then they can, when they're confronted with something, that's maybe a little harder to answer, they're like, well, it goes beyond just taking that mountain lion. The people who do hunt mountain lions, they also eat the mountain lion, and many of them say it's
yeah.
their favorite meat that they have. Like, you're not getting the mountain lion. I'll give you some elk, but you're not getting the mountain lion.
Yeah.
There's it's we have nowhere but up. We have up to go. That's it. Like, it's almost like we're
Yep.
starting at zero. So everything is an opportunity. And what Mike did really well in Colorado is we have a letter to the editor tool,
Mm.
and he wrote these articles that, when he's pressing send, he's just in hopes somebody's going to read it on the other end. And this is going to, the Denver Post or Westward, you know,
Hmm.
not typically where you're going to hear about hunting, right?
Yeah.
Well, Prop 127 was going on, and Mike wrote these amazing articles, and they got picked up, and Westward said, "Hey, we're gonna feature this, and we're gonna put this out there because we'd never heard this type of talk before, but it's really good content, so we're gonna put it there." And then that led to somebody reading that article, and news anchors, I don't know, journalists, whatever, calling up Mike and saying, "Hey, we want you on the Channel 4 news
The
show."
Denver News.
Yeah, Denver
Yeah.
News or whatever. Like, let's hear more about this. And I think that's proof in the pudding right there. Don't be afraid of the message. Don't be afraid of putting it out there because it works. They've never heard it. All they've heard is we're Elmer Fudd,
Yeah.
and kill that rabbit and what, what I mean. Just we're bloodthirsty, whatever, all the terms that are put on us. So if you're not directly confronting that message with who we really are, then that's all they got. That's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
they've gone with. And how come we're not hearing from the hunters? We're not hearing a better message on this. But when you do that, and Mike did it really well, it gets recognized. It gets
Yeah.
placed in some of the biggest, can get placed in some of the biggest publications that there are, and that really changes. That's way beyond our reach.
Yeah.
We couldn't have I mean, we could have paid for that, but we don't have enough money. So it was just the message
Right.
worked. It was invaluable.
Yeah.
And so there's a trap that the anti-hunting industry sets for us, and that is one of highly polarized positions. The wolf
Mhm.
advocates will say you should never ever kill any wolf ever for any reason. The mountain lion advocates want to save every mountain lion, and so they create these incredibly divisive stances where the flag is planted so far at the extreme. The problem is that too often we reflect back like a mirror a similar extreme
Right.
because we feel like that's the threat. Like we respond with shoot, shovel, shut up, or we respond with there's good wolf's a dead wolf and stuff like that.
Mm.
And I don't, I grew up reading the track of the grizzly, and I I I thought all these animals were amazing as a kid, and I think
Mhm.
at our heart, most humans, including most hunters, think seeing a mountain lion on the foot or a wolf or a grizzly bear is an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Um, we don't run out in the woods to kill elk or deer because we're mad at them, right?
No.
Now there is a purpose. There's a conservation purpose of harvesting a predator off the landscape because you're supporting the ecosystem that's otherwise got human pressure against it already. But we need to be careful to not reflect back that extreme stance, because when we do, we look like the person or the group of people that they want the middle ground to think we are. And so we have to be really cognizant that as we move towards the middle, is if we start to care about the non-hunter, the general public non-hunter, and when I mean care about them, I mean invest time in talking to them at scale and sharing stories and relevance that they can relate to at scale. It doesn't mean we're become less of a hunter. It just we're not falling into the trap that polarizing statement is set to have us fall into.
Yeah. Living in wolf country, here in Montana, uh, lived that, breathed that, smelled that for the last
Yeah,
20 years, more than 20 years now, 1995, so 30 years. There, I could use 19 in front of that.
Yeah.
there you go.
But yeah, you see that, and if you are in the hunting space in within some communities, if you try to go out and speak to some of those things you just mentioned, Mike, you're really making yourself vulnerable
Mm,
with the hunting community that is planted their stake with
mm,
we're here till you know the bitter end, and we shoot shovel shut up, whatever term you want to use. uh I wrote an article for Bugle magazine about when we could first start hunting wolves here, and that's the Elk Foundation magazine. And I kind of wrapped it up by saying anyone who spends 2 weeks chasing these amazing animals in the mountains like I just did, your respect for them is going to be really, really high. And as
mm.
we walked up to that wolf, all I could think about was, man, this wolf really didn't ask to be in these political crosshairs, right?
Right.
It just needs big open country and it likes to eat elk.
Hmm.
I don't want to be involved in politics if I can help it, and I love big open country and I love to eat elk.
Hmm.
And I still, I've told people that if anyone in the Montana legislature says we're going to eradicate wolves off the landscape, you're going to have to come through me.
Hmm.
Right.
And that really pisses off a lot of people. They're like, I knew you were one of those crazy goofball.
Mm.
You get some really weird email when you advocate for a bigger notion that every species has some place. It doesn't mean we don't manage them,
Right.
but some
Right.
people have planted themselves so far to that edge that anything short of wiping them out, you now are part of the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
And unfortunately, in today's world of, social media or whatever, everyone's got a platform to
Mhm.
whatever degree they have followers or friends or whatever. And, you make yourself vulnerable. But I think part of the responsibility that comes with folks trusting you, trusting your platforms that you're going to be there for the right reasons and
Hmm.
you're here to advocate. You just got to be willing to accept some of that and say, you know what, that comes with the territory. I am not out of pressure or fear or concern going to move way over to one fringe of it because I know that's where we're going to lose in the long run.
Right.
And if being here telling compelling stories that hunters and non-hunters alike can at least appreciate, I'm willing to take whatever vulnerability or arrows come with that.
Yeah.
Uh, but in the hunting space, that when you are part of a community that feels under attack all the time, not that's not always the easiest thing to do, and I understand
Hmm.
Sure.
some people don't necessarily want to do it. I'm
But what's unfortunate is by hunters or anybody that's say against a specific predator taking such a an extreme stance, they're actually adding the jet fuel
Mhm.
into the opposing side's
Yep.
war chest, into their engine, and strategically it doesn't work. And so and it is how we lose. Like the wolf advocacy, it is an industry. Like it is literally an industry that that lives purely on division.
Yep.
Like if they cannot take an extreme stance that has relevance against another extreme stance, they don't exist.
Yeah.
Because as soon as everybody in the middle says, you know what, we love wolves, we love elk, we love cattle, there's a way to have them all. Humans have had conflict with wolves since the beginning of time, but they didn't kill them all. They established some territories and got along, figured it out. Usually through lethal removal as the tool, but the wolves didn't go away. As soon as we can get the large part of the community to say adaptive management works over the long haul, then that industry of wolf advocacy will go away.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason I say that wolves are really a bovine and not a canine. They're a cash cow,
Hmm.
and it's I mean they're the example that gets used so much, right?
Sure.
And I think uh, states that ignore the need to manage all species are doing a disservice to that species itself. Uh, I look at the betrayal that happened using the wolf reintroduction in the Northern Rockies. We all sat down in good faith with any and every group. They were all invited to the meetings, and it was okay. When you reach this number for 3 consecutive years, we will
Hmm.
start the process of delisting. And we think that'll happen in probably 2001. And those biologists hit a bullseye. 2001,
Wow.
we'd met the threshold. And so it took 10 years of litigation. And so I don't know if the folks who were doing all that litigating, who were trying to make money at this, trying to hold on to the levers of power,
Hmm.
I don't know if they realized how damaging that was to the bigger picture of conservation. Because you took a lot of people who were really sincere and honest and saying, let's find that place where wolves can fit on this landscape. And these were ag producers, cattlemen, hunters, I mean, across the spectrum. And that use of lawsuits, litigation process really damaged the likelihood of any species ever again getting reintroduced in the Northern Rockies.
Hmm.
I,
And anybody that was paying attention, nationwide, is
yeah,
going to be suspicious.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, I,
really
I,
it damaged. And that's the human side of it. Like the human side of it, people got selfish, people got you know we if the reintroduction could have been done and they were delisted crisply as soon as those populations were hit, we would be in a completely different place now, probably on this entire dialogue nationwide.
yep, yes, we would. And I think for future discussions, whether it's grizzly bears, whether it's lynx, whether it's whatever, you will never get the Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming delegations or the communities to trust the process ever again until the process is heavily reformed. And so I try to articulate that a lot of times to people who maybe don't didn't live it, breathe it. Uh, I was invited to go to Washington and Lee University and do a presentation about that to their environmental studies groups. And no one had ever really thought about it that way. The
Hmm.
biggest losers in this whole wolf battle in the Northern Rockies has been any opportunity to do conservation of rare species ever again. It's going
Mm,
to take multiple generations for that pain and that distrust to go away. Uh, so those are, I guess, for me, the benefit of life lessons of living through all that, seeing all that, and saying, you know what, I don't want that to be flipped where I'm doing something
Hmm.
that for my own personal and selfish reasons, that I'm going to create the kind of damage that the groups created that I criticize for what they did. So it's I guess all of this stuff for me is that important that maybe I get too deep in the weeds in it. Maybe I try to dissect it and think about it too much, but it just is that important to me
mm,
that I spend a lot of time trying to understand that part of it. The human side of it is the hardest part to predict and understand.
mhm. I think it's becoming more and more what you just said and diving into those conversations and, thinking about it, thinking about messaging. Like if you want to, if you're involved in the wolf debate or an organization, the wolf debate, it's probably not the best. You're not going to win, whatever winning means,
Yeah.
if you have a picture of a wolf with crosshairs over it.
Right.
You might get pats on the back from, hunters and some people,
Yep.
and that's great. But who is it going to take? Who do you need to reach to win? It's
Hmm.
the general public. And it seems really simple, but some people don't get that. But they're starting to get it a lot more. And I think the way things work, especially today in social media, the conversation the story you just told
Hmm.
makes total sense to me. And I think it's becoming cool to talk about. Like,
Hmm.
because because we've seen wins in California, which is huge,
Yeah.
because we're seeing wins in Colorado, and there's multiple states. We're
Yeah.
seeing these wins, and then let's dissect it. How did we get the win? Because we talked about what you just talked about right there, and we know it
Yeah.
works. So when people see that something works, they'll change. They'll change they'll hit it from different angles and say, all right, maybe that works. Maybe this is how we need to do it, instead of being in opposition to one extreme by becoming another extreme.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Let's actually lead the way. Let's take over the conversation,
Yeah.
instead of just being reactive. And that is 100% happening, and it's growing, and we have to keep that going. And then I think one day we're going to own the decisions, but we'll own um the narrative, and it's up to us to make sure that it falls in line with um just call it the North American model,
Yeah.
falls in line with responsible wildlife management. We can all do that because it really is the most reasonable approach, and we have to start taking that approach.
Yeah. Well, I always say, if you don't tell your story, someone's going to tell it for you,
Yeah,
and you probably aren't
Exactly.
going to like the way that they tell your story.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think collectively, the hunting community is getting better at that. And I see it in a lot of places. I see that it's improving, and you know I don't care what it is. I'm here to win, right? I'm
yeah,
not here to complain or here to get something off my chest. I'm here to win.
Yeah.
And whatever the strategies and tactics are to win these struggles and these challenges that we face, that's what I'm here to do.
hmm,
I'm not vested in any, oh, this is my idea, so that's what we got to do. That's why I think when you talk about the dissection or autopsies of the Colorado uh, lion, what is it, 127?
Yeah.
that is so valuable in a lot of ways. One, it finally, I think, woke up a large number of people to realize, you know what, we can win.
Mhm.
It also gave us a little bit of a game plan of how we can win, because preliminary the early polling said that we were probably going to lose by anywhere from 6 to 9 points on
Mm-hmm.
that one. And we flipped it the other way and we won by, I can't remember, 5 or 6, something like
10.
that. 10, was it?
10.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And so I hope that people realize groups like HOWL are thinking this through. You guys aren't here to say, "Oh, we need, X million members and we need this amount of money." You,
Wait a second.
I,
Hold on.
no,
Hold
you,
on. I thought we
well,
did need millions of
let me.
members.
All right, let me restate that. The purpose of your work is benefited by having more
Is to get
members,
it done.
but it's not that we're just here to say we need more members.
Yeah.
It's to win.
Yeah.
And so you guys have brought a lot of strategy, a lot of different approach to this. Is Howell a 501c3 or C4?
C3.
3.
C3.
We are a
Okay.
nonprofit.
Okay.
Focus on education and advocacy.
Okay. Cool.
Yep. Yep.
Because, one of the things that, and this is just sitting on the board of directors of a large national nonprofit for 6 years. Anytime you're a 501c3 and your membership wants you, hey, get involved in this issue,
Mm.
get involved in this bill, pretty soon someone's starting to say, well, you got restrictions on what you can do in terms of political activity and what you can
Mhm.
do in terms of lobbying and blah, blah, blah. And so
Mhm.
there's always that danger. And I think some of the groups who, are predictably on the opposite side have taken advantage of that and said, you
Mhm.
know
Hmm.
what,
Oh yeah.
these folks, they don't have any 501c4 groups, they don't have communication strategies, they rely on a group of volunteers who take the day off to testify or show up. I wouldn't even say we look like the junior varsity some days when we walk into the game. We might look like the Pop Warner team.
Mhm.
Yeah.
uh,
Mhm.
and it's not due to lack of passion, it's not due to lack of interest. It is just due to the fact that we've not been the strategists and tacticians that we needed to be successful. And
Right.
Colorado's is that way. And that's, you guys are so good at that. You see it differently than others, and that's why I want to make sure that our audience gets you more members, Mike. I don't want.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to make the
We
call to action that everybody needs to go to
It's 30
howl.org.
bucks. It's our we have multiple memberships that can plug you into other cool deals as well. But yeah, the base
But
membership's 30 bucks. I mean, half of a box of cheap ammo is our
yeah,
membership. And
yeah,
we've got I think you said it. I'm gonna say it again. We see things differently, and then we synthesize strategies and position statements and messaging differently as well.
mhm,
And I think part of it is because we are new. We're not burdened by 50 people on the board. We're not burdened by a species of focus.
yep,
We're not burdened by a state or a method of take of focus.
mhm,
Um, we're not burdened by government contracts. Like we don't do any land work. We don't have any big land deals that are tied up right now. If U.S. Forest Service pulls out from a transaction with us because they don't like what we're doing, like we're painfully nimble, and we're willing to say stuff that other people would get fired for.
yeah.
We, you know,
Uh,
and
no,
and
it's
so
true.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
absolutely
it's
true.
true. And I think we said before you hit record. I think it was before you hit record that after this last election, I posted something up on my Facebook, my personal Facebook page, that like all ecosystems will self-correct eventually, like political, social, financial, ecological, like wildlife. All ecosystems will self-correct, and we have to be there. We can't just be spectators to it.
Yeah.
Like we have to be participants in the process, and an example of that is Washington State, which is I think where we started this conversation, where you've been concerned about the direction Washington's going with effectively a dysfunctional commission. we realized at the end of last year, like, we can't keep advocating to the commission. It's like that's the definition of insanity. We're not going to get a different outcome with the commission, but
Yeah.
we need to start talking to an incoming governor who's new to the scene and needs to know what we think as hunters. We need to start talking to the senators that approved the commissioners,
Yeah.
and we need to take our case to them. Like, we usually want to focus on commissions, but if we're not getting what we need there, we need to go to the electeds that put those commissioners there, and we need to start talking to those people and letting them know that they have a problem that they can help solve. And that's been our focus with our HOWL actions in Washington so far. And I would say that I think there's directionally changes are happening in Washington this year
Yeah.
that are really refreshing. And it's not just because of what we've done. Hundreds of hunters have participated in our action. It's also because other communities have sensed these issues and they're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So we're not spectators to this in our the HOWL pack, our members, people. I think that's the most important thing is they're not spectators to it, and
Yeah.
anybody can get involved and support this. But the more we've got those members that are committed and active, then the more bandwidth we've got to drive resources and drive advocacy and drive messaging into the right community.
Oh, you guys are doing a very effective job. In my presentations in Washington last week, Saturday is always a Q&A session. They can ask me anything from marriage advice to tax advice. Well, when you've been a CPA for 30 some years and you hunt 100 days a year and fish 40 days a year and you're having your 36th anniversary tomorrow,
Something's right.
I'm the guy to take marriage advice
Yeah.
from. So I think that's why I get a lot. But your name, Howl, came up multiple times in that Q&A.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that a
And
good thing?
someone, no, all
What?
good things. Like
Yeah.
someone would ask a question, and another person in the audience would say, "Well, have you read the Howl email we all got?" And like, "Well, no, what's that?" And then I'd say, "Well, here's what you do. You go to
Nice.
howl.org. If you aren't going to give them your money, at least give them your email.
Yeah.
But please
Hmm.
give them your money."
Hmm.
And no, you guys have an oversized footprint in Washington
Yeah.
relative to what you probably should have based on your membership.
Washington needs, and that's because Washington needs the most help, and
Yeah,
it's. I think it's severely lacking leadership in the sense of leadership that I see in other states that we work in. In Oregon, there's the Oregon Hunters Association.
yep,
Amy Patrick is the policy director. In California, there's frankly it's Gaines and Associates, and he kind of organizes everybody and works with legislators and the commissioners. And in Arizona, there's all these different states have kind of these points of contact, where you can at least find out what's going on, and we work with all of them. In Washington, we don't have that at
right,
all. Like it's blatantly missing, and it's odd. So what happened is, and I know you're aware of them. There's the Conservation Coalition
right,
of Washington, and those are
yep.
just really concerned, passionate men
It's
and
where we
women who
were.
are.
It's where we were 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's
It's
very similar
just
to that.
just a, you know.
And
I
so they're really taking charge, the best that they can, and getting involved at all levels. But yeah, I mean, you see a lot in Washington because there's just a big blank space there that's missing, and I think it's probably the the most it's the hot topic state right
yeah,
now. At so many different levels. So there's a lot of opportunities there, but it comes down to education. So I think, and it really makes me happy to hear people say, "Did you get the email?" A lot of these, and most of what we do, you don't even see an email. It's on social media, honestly. But a lot of these issues can be complex,
yep,
right? Especially, you work a 9 to 5. Gosh, what's going on with this? What's the Ruckle House review? What's
yep,
going? I think where we really excel is we try our best and this is in collaboration with a lot of people. We're not just kind of doing it in house, but we try our best to break down the issue so everybody can understand it. So they can wrap their brains around it, and then give them, here's the ways to engage. Here are the
Yeah.
multiple ways to engage, and if you need some starter points with that, here's some emails, here's some talking points, here's some verbal testimony examples. um, so they'll read through everything, they'll read through the verbal testimony episode, and it starts to make sense. They're like, oh, yeah, 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 okay, it's relevant now, I can
Yeah.
relate to it, I know how I can apply myself in this situation now. And that's where we can really make the impact, when people can connect the dots and really, again, make it personal, and then they can reach out to whoever they need to reach out to, and then, those stories are heard, and the pleas are heard. And it certainly doesn't hurt that, I think, in Washington, through the legislature, and even through the with the new governor, it's recognized that there's a major problem with the commission.
Yeah.
Now, what's going to be the outcome? I don't know, but there's a lot of folks trying to focus and channel and drive a better outcome than what it is, and it's really because of education that's been happening over the last, I think, 3 years now is when we started in Washington. It started with the spring bear deal.
Yeah.
Um,
But we're not just
when we started,
stopping losses now. It
yeah.
looks like this commission, this governor may actually not want a hot mess there. He may actually want like good governance and just moderation of everything, which means if we advocate correctly and continue to stay involved, we can start pulling back and bringing back spring bear. We can start bringing back the hound hunting and the mountain lion hunting that was lost. There's room to actually have things go positively in Washington. And I'm going to break some news, Charles. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Hmm.
Uh-oh.
What's This
You
is
heard it here
exciting.
Um,
first.
one of the so two things. One thing, we talk about Washington. How members, how people that have howled through our website are in all 50 states. And one of the coolest things about the way we set our tech up is that people can talk across state lines. So if you're in Utah, you can actually send a message through HOWL to the governor.
Oh.
We're all participants in wildlife. Many of us hunt multiple states, so it's appropriate for us to have an opinion that we can share with an elected official in another state. Well, one of the things that we said last year with Prop 127 in Colorado is that we're all past, present, or future hunters of Colorado. Like, who doesn't dream of going to Colorado to hunt the
Yep.
big mountains, bighorn
Mm-hmm.
sheep, mule deer, elk, etc. So if you don't dream about it, if you don't aspire to that even a little bit, then I'm not sure if you got a pulse. So we're all past, present hunters of Colorado. So we took it on ourselves to nationalize that issue last year, and
Mm-hmm.
people nationwide really got involved. And that's something that I think has been really different, is that the idea of pulling everybody into the sandbox and letting them know and showing them how they can participate across state lines is key. Um, and then as far as being proactive, last year we were defending mountain lion hunting reactively. This year, Coloradans are going to have the opportunity to sign petitions, which will put a ballot initiative up in 2026 to put an end to the wolf reintroduction plan.
Oh.
So that's coming out. Yeah, yeah, and this is proactive work. And so if you want to push back ballot box biology, if you want to put ballot box biology and that entire industry back on its heels, every state can participate in supporting this initiative in Colorado, which is the Smart Wolf Policy Initiative to put an end to reintroduction. And we're lucky enough that we're at the table for that, and in terms of the strategy and the planning, and that's going to be huge, and it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be fun to win again, not on a defensive
Yeah.
play, but on a proactive play that returns management to CPW and takes away this lightning rod of division that is forced reintroduction of a apex predator on the landscape.
Well, I know talking to lots of people and my own personal feelings, I do get tired of playing defense all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, the team that has the ball, I don't care if it's football or hockey or basketball. The team that possesses the ball most of the time is on offense, and they
Hmm.
usually win.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yes,
So
yeah,
it just wears you down. So that's great to hear. That I'm sure a lot of people are like, "Well, how do I sign up for that?"
yeah.
But
Well, people are gonna hear a lot about it in the next, between now and May. People are gonna hear a lot about it. It doesn't have a title yet, but we're anticipating springtime signature gathering. And it for technical reasons with the way Colorado does their elections, it can't go on the ballot until 2026. So
okay.
this year, first half of this year is especially about getting petitions signed, getting volunteers to hold petitions to get signatures.
Hmm.
So, just like 14,000 yard signs were distributed during Prop 127, to win that. Um, there's going to be need for 1,000 or more volunteers to hold a petition and get signatures. But that's going to be this year, and then it'll be on the ballot in 2026, and it's going to
Wow.
be huge because again, Colorado, the heart of the country, center of the Rockies, center of the U.S.
Hmm.
Winning on this sends a message not just in Colorado, but it sends a message really nationwide about what we are collectively willing to tolerate and what we want to see in terms of science-based wildlife management.
Wow. That, you guys didn't tell me you're gonna drop that bomb here. I'm
It's new.
unprepared to
It's
even.
very
It's
yeah.
fast moving.
Yeah.
But no, it's exciting because so many people listening, I'm sure, are gonna say, "Finally, how can I
Hmm.
Yeah,
play a little offense here? How can I assertively make my case
yep,
and force others to have to defend against what I think is a valid case for my position?" And
yep,
Colorado's a great place to do it. Largest
Hmm.
elk
yeah,
population, some of the greatest mule deer hunting, bighorn sheep hunting, a
Hmm.
heritage of hunting that goes back forever, and
Hmm.
it'd be an interesting place to to see that unfold there.
yeah.
Um, you know, you brought up Charles Conservation Coalition of Washington.
Hmm.
I met with them when I was out there last week, all
Hmm.
five of them,
Yeah.
five volunteers
Yeah.
who, when it was just those five, I'm like, you guys have a really professional
Hmm.
social media presence. It's just the five of you? And they're like,
Hmm.
yeah. um, how do you got any advice for how a handful of motivated people like that interact, can use HOWL or can leverage what you guys are doing to help them? Or because every state somebody's got these issues that they feel are not getting the attention they deserve, or maybe some pretty big issues that we're just a small community of advocates, so we can't get to every one of them, but that doesn't mean there aren't people out there who are concerned about it.
Hmm.
You guys got ideas or
Well,
suggestions for people?
for ideas or suggestions for the coalition there, the five people, is that what you mean?
No,
Because
for
we
for
oh
for
okay,
for
that's good.
for anyone listening who's like, I got 7 or 8 of my friends here. We might try do something like that.
That's just it. You start, you try, you
Okay.
dig into it. It's as simple as I had no idea what I was getting into. I knew something needed to change, and I had a few different some new ideas that, an idea is an idea. What is it going to
Yeah.
turn into? It's really starting a movement, and it starts with passion. A it sometimes will start with maybe a single idea, and it builds from there. So
Yeah.
yeah, sure, if there's people in other states that want to start something, just do it. Just start. There's going to be mistakes that are made, but
People
dig
will tell
in.
you it won't work.
Yeah, everyone's going to say it's
What?
not going to work.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
all the time. Yeah. No,
um,
the reason I was laughing when you said that is My first dive into the conservation space was not at all intentional.
Mm,
I spent a lot of time trapping, paid for a lot of my college trapping in Nevada, where I was living at the time, working for one of the national CPA firms. You had to take your bobcat pelts in to get sealed at the Division of Wildlife headquarters. Well, the media would show up whatever day of the month the bobcat pelts were going to be there, and all the animal rights protesters were there. Well, here I come with an armful of bobcat pelts with my suit and my tie because I took lunch off from the CPA firm. Well, who do you suppose all the media came? I mean, I
mm.
was as conspicuous as anybody, you know. What the? Where'd they find this
He's a
shill to
funny
show up?
looking trapper.
Mhm.
Yeah. Uh, so, and not even by, I mean, I had a great interest in, bobcats and conservation and trapping and all that. But it wasn't that I raised my hand and said, I really want
Mm,
to be on the news tonight.
mhm.
Uh, but I ended up being on the news, being in the Las Vegas newspaper, and just things like that started getting me more engaged, more involved. Montana, I stood up and said my piece at a big land exchange meeting shortly after I moved here, and that's how I ended up getting involved in conservation and public access in Montana. So your point of just go do it and get involved,
Yeah.
follow your passion. Don't let passion become emotion, because emotion is usually not as effective as passion, but
Hmm.
Mhm.
you you will get it done. I always have three principles I warn people. It's not easy. If it was easy, they'd call it golf, so it's going to be difficult. It's going to be uncomfortable. Someone you work with or your neighbor or a family member is going to have a different opinion, and they're going to let you know about it, and they're going to try and
Mhm.
make you uncomfortable, and it's going to be inconvenient. You
Hmm.
don't
Mhm.
no one calls you 3 years in advance and says, hey, we just want to let you know we're going to come and take your hunting season away in 3 years.
Mhm.
It pops up, and
Hmm.
if if everybody's too busy or it's not a priority, we don't win.
Mm.
So I just tell people, if you accept those three things, it pretty much is just like water off a duck's back. Then
Mhm.
you just accept it, head down, plow ahead, uh, and you're committed to it. And showing up is kind of that first step. Uh, I'm
It
glad you
to-
guys said that.
it really is, and I think there's, if you show up to a commission meeting and you give your first speech, you might be nervous or whatever it is, and then you give your second
Yeah.
one, your third one, you just start to get more invested, and
Mhm.
when you do that, it just leads you down a path. You don't know what the path is, but it leads you down a different path than you were on before you did that, right?
Yeah.
And you learn and you meet new people, and it's kind of how I met Mike, really. And
Yeah.
and throughout this process, I have met so many wonderful people that have amazing stories to tell, and people. There's this guy out of Oregon, Stan. He's this old trapper guy, and the guy is just, he's so articulate and he explains trapping so well, and um but he's never been able to really get the message out, and I think that's what I personally excel at. I like to find people like that, and okay, I know how to get your message out because I think it's going
Mhm.
to resonate, right? Those are the people I like to work with.
Yeah.
It's just the struggle for, and what we hear a lot is, Um, it's usually, from a lot of the older guys. They're like, "Gosh, we've been wanting to do this for 30 or 40 years. We just haven't been able to figure out how." And that's what you've accomplished. Like, you're actually able to get our message out in a way that we haven't been able to put the puzzle pieces together. And
Yeah.
I don't know really what that magic sauce is, but whatever we have going here, it's doing just that. And that's why so many people reach out to us, for help on a lot of these issues. And for me, it's like, give me your content. We'll be able to get it because it's great content, and that's where it all starts. Is great content. A lot of people
Mhm.
just don't know how to deliver it, right? Especially in this
Yeah.
space. And yeah, I think, as far as me personally, that's what I like to focus on.
Mhm.
Mike can talk for hours and hours and hours on really good stuff. And I'm like, God, how do you hold all this stuff in your brain? But I like to take what Mike says and put it into a space, and like, break it down because I'm like, this is a really good message. How do I deliver this to people that need to hear it?
Yeah.
That because then that's where, somebody new is listening to it. Somebody new that wouldn't have heard it, can say, wow, I like that. I like where he's coming from. I've never heard that before. I've never heard it put in a way like that before. We hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just there's so many pieces to this puzzle. And but that's where we're going, and I think that's why we're going to ultimately win. And frankly, I think we can make the true anti-hunting movement, I think we can make them irrelevant in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
I really do.
So there's a superpower that Charles has. Like, how does Howl work? One of the things that Howl does, and it's not me because I'm never on the phone. Charles is on the phone all the time. Like, Charles does an amazing amount of due diligence on all of these issues and develops a network of people that we've all heard of, and also a network of people that none of us know, to validate what's the issue, what's the political landscape, where's the landmine in this issue. Is it something that hunters in four states removed should know about and get involved in and can have an effect in? So I'd say there's a high level of discernment in terms of what we get involved in. It's not just the layups, it's the ones that, A, the need is there, and B, like, there's a local group of people that can help amplify what we create. We create a tool, other people leverage it, other people amplify it. And so I think that, in terms of, I think trust is a huge part of what we've cultivated. People trust us. We're kind of a note, like, we'll be honest to the point of being offensive sometimes, but we're not ever going to be, people won't have to worry that we're talking out of both sides of our mouth on something.
Yeah.
And so there's a great degree of trust both in the organizations but also in the grassroots community that have seen organizations maybe not do what they thought they were going to do, what they hope to do. And so
Yeah.
I think that's, if somebody wants to know what we do, I think we build trust and collaboration.
Well, doing what you say you're going to do has been a success in every aspect of every. I don't care if it's politics, business, volunteerism, religion. Doing what you say you're going to do and do it well
Yeah.
Mhm.
has been one of the foolproof, you know, models that just never fails. And
Mhm.
if that's how you are able to do that, uh, because when I was listening to you say that, Charles, about a bunch of older people who've been at it for a while, that is so common. We have some stories, we understand how it works, but we have no idea. My very first engagement in this with a local rod and gun club that we built was sitting down at my CPA office. Someone wrote on a program called Word Perfect. Everyone knows
Mm.
Word and other stuff.
Yeah.
Printed off one page. We ran it through the photocopier, and it said, "Dear member," we didn't have a database where you could merge or customize anything. And we had all of their names on printed off on the 10 by 3 labels, Avery labels. And we sat there for hours licking envelopes, putting labels on, licking envelopes. And then when we really needed to call people to action, we had a phone tree. All right, I got to call these 4 people. And everyone had a landline. And those 4 people each got to call
Yep.
4 people.
Yep.
And then you close the loop by calling the first person to say, okay, I called these 4 people.
Mhm.
That's as sophisticated as we were able to figure it out. And
Mhm.
some would look at my platforms and say, Randy, you haven't progressed very far from that. But so there are a ton of engaging people with cool stories, with passion, with a desire to make a difference. But I do think in today's world where there's such a volume of messaging, we just
Hmm.
don't know how to go about it.
Mhm.
And you guys being those experts, that is such a critical piece to what I think the hunting and conservation voice has been missing for, well, a long time. I mean,
Hmm.
so
It's all about. I think for me, it's all about communication. And back to that trapper guy, the way that it's not just about trapping, it's just the dots that he can connect. He's an absolute gold mine. There's so many gold mines. There's people I've talked to, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you gotta I gotta talk to this person, and people need to hear what you're saying. So
yeah.
there were a lot of fur bands. There's been a lot of fur bands recently.
Hmm.
And I think I remember the first time it came up, it was definitely new to me, but it seemed to be new to the coalition group we were in as well. Like, hey, he brought it up. He goes, hey, why don't we get the fly fishermen involved in this? And everyone goes, what do you mean? Well, their flies are all made
Yeah.
out of fur,
Right.
right? And it was like all these light bulbs went off for everybody, and they're like, oh wow, that's a unique collaboration.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should do that. And
Now
then,
anglers care.
yeah, now anglers care about it, which adds a whole different layer to
Right.
this whole thing. And that's a powerful group,
Yeah.
and a different group as well, with different concerns, of their own. But just things like, there's so many smart people out there, and I personally, I just like working with people, and
Yeah.
making it better, trying to make it better.
Well, if there's a hunting advocacy network, you guys are really good at networking. And just so many people in the circles I run are, well, I'm going to talk to, Howell. I'm going to talk to Charles, or I'm going to this, or I'm going to that. And
Cool.
you guys in the short period of time uh, have made a huge difference. And I suspect you guys, where you're at today versus where you see yourself in 20 years, you probably feel like, man, we just took the first two steps. We got way bigger plans than this, but
We see it as a generational paradigm shift.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Like I one of my missions is I want the average non-hunter to think of trophy hunting. I'm going to say it out
hmm,
loud, as trophy hunting as the most optimal and beneficial form of hunting there is, because it's highly selective. You're not indiscriminately killing. You're selective. You're probably leaving tags on the table. You're putting the most into resources, and you're taking the least off the landscape. Now,
yeah,
most of us won't be at that level, buying $100,000 tags, or buying 5 tags in a season and not harvesting anything because they didn't meet whatever metric we're looking for. But like right now, the general public has the exact opposite view of that word.
right, yep,
The view that they have is poaching. Like the view that they have is of trophy is this effectively poaching. And so, but we let that slip. Like we let that slip. Boone and Crockett exists for a reason. Pope and Young exists for a reason. Is to collect the data on specimens and create a database and a book of information that can be studied over decades. And so, it's up to us to redefine that, so that when people understand the mechanism that is regulated hunting, they understand it's putting back into the system at such a level that the critters are happy. And
yeah,
that's all most people care about. Are the critters okay? That's all they care about. And if we're the ones solving that problem for them, they're going to want us doing it.
that's that's a way that not many people have approached this problem, Mike. I mean, I'm I just turned 60, and so
Yeah.
when you talk about this generational stuff, there's something weird about when all of a sudden there's a six in front of your age. Besides the fact that you look through the obituaries every Saturday morning to see how many people had a
Ah,
six in front of their
Oh
name,
no, don't
age.
go there.
But you really do start seeing things generationally. And
Hmm.
one of my biggest, I don't know if I don't want to say concerns, but a focus is, all right, I've spent 30 some years of my life volunteering for conservation and access on public land. How does that, whatever I've learned and come to understand and have for relationships and trust, how do you transfer that? It's not like you can just say, well, I, Randy Newberg, upon my death, bequeath all of this to so and so.
Hmm.
So it's it's a it's a focus of mine at this point to say, all right, what have I learned, both through a lot of mistakes and a few successes, to make sure that that next generation and the generations and the generations can benefit from that in some way. And I don't know that I'll ever have oh, here's a 12-step program. This is the answer.
Hmm.
I think it's engaging. I think it's trying to, for me, I don't have an employee that's over 40. I think they're all under 35.
Mm.
Uh, and the people I engage with, I purposely seek out younger people, like the coalition there in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just so they probably wonder, why is he so enthusiastic around us? Is this a facade or something?
Mm-hmm.
No, here's a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds who have said, "Look, this is my future.
Hmm.
I'm standing up. I'm going to say,
Mm-hmm.
what needs to be said." And nothing gives me greater hope and inspires me than to
Hmm.
see that next generation and that next generation doing that. So, uh, you guys are doing a good job of it.
Mm. Thank
Excited
you.
to see where it goes forward. Uh, we've kept the audience for 90 minutes. Uh, they sometimes will hang around for, I don't know, 2 hours, 3 hours if you want to talk that long. But are there things that we haven't covered yet that you'd want people to know about where you're going, what you're doing, and how you do it?
There's so many things to talk about, but I think we've covered the a lot of the details and also a 30,000 foot view of what Howl for Wildlife is and what it is we want to do. Um, speaking of the Super Bowl, we need a Super Bowl commercial. So
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
money does need to come in. That's the space. That's really the space that I'm concerned with
Hmm.
working in
Yeah.
is the public space. I'm talking billboards and commercials and educational material that's meant for the general public.
Yeah.
Um, that's what I'm really solely focused on. Of course, we're focused on hunters and
Right.
actions and all that, but that all works towards that, right?
Yep.
But I think we've covered a lot. And Mike broke the news about Colorado, so well, that's kind of like starting this week with us. So we're gonna be really heavily working on that, uh, starting this week and for the next whatever it is, 18 months or 16 months.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big part of what we're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think this was
Well,
great.
We aspire to having like we have a brand that was
Oh
kind of
yeah.
soft launched. We have a brand. It's called Hunting is Human, and the idea behind Hunting is Human is that every human community since the beginning of time has had hunters in it.
yep.
Not all humans have hunted. Like not all people were hunters, but just about every community has had hunters in it, and so it's not like we shouldn't be saying we get to hunt because we pay for conservation. That comes across as being very entitled.
Right.
There's different ways that we deliver or defend hunting, but to me the most basic level of defensive hunting is we are wired, humans are wired to do it, and humans have been doing it forever. So the whole, oh, the animals were here first, like no, like the animals evolved the way they did because they had people chasing them around, you
Right.
know? And so like we we want to get to the point where we're putting billboards up, as you drive across the Golden Gate Bridge into San Francisco, and as you're driving into Seattle and you're driving to Denver and you're driving into LA, and people that are only getting the anti-hunting industry message, that we can put together a really charismatic, quick and persuasive, vision of the fact that hunting is essentially and intrinsically human. And while humans have done too much hunting at times, market hunting,
Yeah.
there's different forms of that have been wrong or bad, but the model that we have now, we can honor and participate in that natural drive and also take care of the critters. Um, so like we would love if we got a bucket of $5 million tomorrow, you'd see in 13 major cities in the US outward facing messaging campaigns to completely diffuse the anti-hunters propaganda.
Hmm.
Hmm.
and
Wow.
shift that mindset, shift that paradigm, so that people 5 and 10 years from now aren't affected by what HSUS is lying about tomorrow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. That's that gets me pretty excited to hear that,
It
Mike.
Yeah, it would be
It
so much more fun to work on that than like
Yeah.
arguing with
Yeah.
the Washington Commission that's trying to strip away, spring bear, because
right.
spring bear comes back if we have that. Like if we get to that point, spring bear comes back, trapping comes back. It's all going to be regulated. We're going to fill out reports and give data to the departments and whatnot. We're going to have to pay for the rights and privileges to participate, but it's all
Hmm.
going to be regulated, and we can drive balanced ecosystems and abundance while still doing these things.
Yeah.
We're a
Well,
multi-billion-dollar industry, the hunting industry, and
mhm,
I think it's the biggest mistake that we haven't done that
yeah.
for being
No,
such a large industry, and that we don't find ourselves in those spaces is the biggest mistake we've made so far.
yeah, I think if you would look at any other industry, they would have made the analysis of where is that 20, 30, 50-year plan,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
they would have brought resources to bear to
Hmm.
start implementing that plan, because you don't put it out there and say, well, in 20 years this is going to be how it is, so in 20 years we'll do this. No,
Right.
the smarter industries, if you want to call hunting an industry, which there is definitely a large commercial enterprise around hunting, always has
Sure.
been, the investment in that future uh, is is concerning. Uh, I'm working on a dissertation right now, and I've been running it past my crew about we're seeing some big trends in the hunting space of smaller companies that they were legacy brands, founder-based brands that really gave everything they could to the cause of hunting and conservation. And what we saw in the fishing space when this happened 20 years ago is you see big conglomerations, and you don't see them showing up. These large fishing brands, they're publicly traded or they're
Mm.
private equity groups, and you don't see them engaged in local issues, state issues. They aren't funding clean water initiatives. They aren't funding, anything
Mm-hmm.
long term. And I'm not here to say that's right or wrong. It's an observation because the models that publicly traded companies operate in, as a CPA who's audited financial statements, well, they want to know what the next quarterly results are.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a different structure for that publicly traded company than there is for the third generation legacy of a company that made its name in the hunting space. Uh, so as you share some of these concerns, my mind's over there with some of these other things that are generational that also I don't know where the answers are, where the problems and solutions are found. But it's definitely an observation that if we're going to need these, I'll call it a war chest of money to go buy that billboard that you guys used as an example, where's that going to come from?
Mm-hmm.
Every other industry has invested and
Mm-hmm.
done that.
Mm-hmm.
We're behind the curve right now.
Mm-hmm.
So um,
Yeah, we're looking for that similarly visionary individual that has a deeper pocket than we do.
yeah,
Or, as you said earlier, a million members to join the Howl Pack, because that's what
there we
we'll do
go.
with it.
Well,
They'll be part of that movement.
anyone listening to this podcast who isn't a member of Howl, you just quit listening. We're not friends anymore.
Or just put it on pause and then come back in 3 minutes.
Yeah, howl.org, right? They can go
Yeah,
there. They can
Yeah.
sign up. They can, and I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but there are so many people we talk to who say, look, I got 4 kids. I volunteer for,
sure.
coaching my daughter's softball team, and I this and I'm that. I got a couple thousand extra dollars. I tell me who I give that to, because
Mm,
I got time, talent, or money.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
right.
And so we can all help in some way, shape, or form. Some can help more than others based on where they're at and the circumstances of their life. So uh, every bit, whether it's the time, the talent, the email, the money, all helps. And I hope everyone listening will go out to howl.org and do that on your behalf because you guys are doing great work. And
Thank you.
Awesome.
I'm
Thank you.
Much
thankful for you
appreciated.
guys.
Much appreciated,
Yeah,
Randy.
yeah, really thankful that you guys showed up when you did. I, as the old country music song says, not a moment too soon. It's no, you guys are doing great work, and I appreciate you being on the podcast today, and I sure hope that this isn't the last time we do a podcast.
Anytime.
Try not to be a nuisance, but
Never, never. We
uh,
love it. Anytime you want to
so
check in on an update or a specific thing or a high level issues, we love to talk about them.
well, be careful saying that, Mike. You might get asked to do an awful. You'll spend all your time talking on a podcast and not get anything done. But no. But well, anyhow, I really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for all you're doing, and folks, I don't say this just to say it. These guys are doing important work on behalf of all of us. So, howl.org. That work? You
Yep.
guys
Or
okay with that?
howforwildlife.org. Both
Yep,
of them
both
work.
of them.
Yep.
Oh, they both go there? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
All right.
howforwildlife.org is the real URL. How.org is forwarded to there. But yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Thanks for listening. Uh, we'll catch you on the next one.